What's going on for you and how could I help?
Um, okay, so I pretty much use every LSAT program out there. I've used the Khan Academy, I've used Kaplan twice, waste of money. I've used Focus Approach, which is pretty much like attorneys teaching you the LSAT material. I've used Princeton Review, the Blueprint, and then LSAT Max. And it's just like I'm having a hard time just understanding the LSAT material. So I just think their teaching style wasn't meshing well with my understanding of how to learn it. Um, and I have taken the LSAT twice, 2 years ago, and let's just say I didn't do so well. So this is a third attempt for me, and I think my overall issue is, I think, let's start easy. I was going through your material, and for strict sequencing games, for some reason, I'm having a hard time interpreting the rules. So it's like when I'm jotting down the rules, especially the ones that say like A and B go before like C, but not both or something like that, I tend to like misinterpret it. So I'm not writing it down correctly. And then it's like I don't realize that I wrote the rule down incorrectly until I'm already halfway into the game. And then it's like I kind of have to start all over again. And then I realize like I'm wasting time. So it's like my thing is, what can I do to overcome that hurdle? That's my biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important. Obviously, you've got to get the rules down. But we can address that, but I also want to address the meta question here, which is how could somebody try 6 or 7 programs?
Yeah.
And there is an answer to this. How could somebody try 6 or 7 programs and just not have it click? Is it that all of these programs are terrible? And of course, being a competitor, I would love to say yes to that. I would love to say they're all terrible. And sure, we could go through and point out all their flaws, but some techniques will work better for some people than others. Some styles will work better for some people than others. Obviously, I happen to think my way is the best, naturally, developed it myself. But I want to talk about specifically here what goes into approaching a logic game from the beginning. It's possible some approaches have you dive in too quickly. It's possible some approaches are simply too boring. It's possible you need something more personalized. Any of those things might be the case. But what does it take to slow down and thoroughly understand a rule before diving in?
I think for me is before diving in and just start jotting down the rule, I think I need to first have an understanding of what the rule is saying. Because oftentimes from a lot of these programs, it would be the instructor doesn't ask anyone, okay, what do you think this rule is? What do you think it's asking? How do you think we should go about writing it down? So instead of just trying to break it down to the very fundamentals, it's just saying A before B. Instead of just explaining the fundamentals, it's just the instructor would just go ahead and then just start diagramming the rule. And the thing is, like, that's very confusing, especially if you don't know the sufficient and necessary. So in my mind, I'm just trying to understand, how did you come to that diagram with A being before B when I didn't even interpret that? So I think that's why I have a hard time, because I don't understand just the very basics. And I think a lot of the instructors go on that assumption that a good majority of students already come into the LSAT prep knowing some level of material, which there are some students that do have some general understanding or some familiarity, but then there are those students that have no understanding or no knowledge. And I think it's hard to grasp those students when the professor or the instructors gearing towards those students that already are coming in with knowledge.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. So a classroom setting, obviously they got to cater to all different people who are retaking it for the third time, people who are just looking at it for the first time, people who are scoring in the 160s, people who are scoring in the 130s. Everybody's at different points. And so naturally, they're going to move at the average speed somewhere in the middle, and some people are going to get left behind. And so what that means is that we've got to have a place where we can approach things from the very beginning, from the absolute basics, assuming nothing. And then the people who are ahead of that point, they can skip that lesson or they don't have to come that day. and we can
Yeah.
address it from the very beginning. There's another idea that comes to mind for me, which is what it takes to do well on test day under timed conditions with a rule like that, that's a little bit outside the norm, is that you've still seen it before. So that when you walk in on test day, it's not really new and you're not really interpreting it for the first time. Obviously, the LSAT throws curveballs here and there. There are points where there is something new on the test, and you can do your best to be ready for anything or be ready to be thrown a curveball. And I have lists of curveball games I could share with you when you're at that point. But part of this is also that most things on the LSAT are not new. So a rule like that, a conditional sequencing rule or a rule with two different options there that could go either way, if you've done a couple of those already, then when you're doing your next timed exam or you're at the actual test, you're not really reinventing the wheel. You're not really working through it for the first time. You actually have seen it before. And that's most of what we're aiming to do on the LSAT in all sections. Like a method of reasoning and logical reasoning, it could be weird, it could be difficult, but it's not really new if you've done a question like that before. Same thing goes for games. So that's what I'd be looking to do for you, is make sure that we leave no stone unturned so that under timed conditions on test day, you're saying, oh, it's that weird rule I've seen half a dozen times.
That makes sense.
Then the other question you're bringing for me here is, can we do something where we're covering things like that from the absolute basics super slowly? And the people who don't need that, they can skip that day or they can skip that lesson. Today, we're covering the basics of rules like this, walking through it. Even if it takes a half hour to explain one rule with a couple of different examples, we could do that. Is that something that would interest you?
That would, because the thing is, like, I've studied this exam on and off, and I have like a treasure chest of LSAT material. It's so ridiculous. The thing is, like, to some degree, I am familiar with all the different logical reasoning questions, and I can identify them. In logic games, I can identify them. But then it's like when it comes to like practice them or do questions, for some part, it's like I'll either like freak out, like freeze, or it's like I will like maybe for logic games specifically, say I will diagram the diagram correctly, but then maybe my inferences are not spot on, and then I'll be able to answer some questions, but then it's like something in my process is just not connecting, and I can't seem to figure out what it is. And then it's like for prep test 52 to like 80 something, I also have the question booklet for it. So then I will review after. And then when I'm doing my intense review, I'm just like, oh my God, like now I see it. I understand it. I understand where I went wrong. But the thing is, it's like I seem to still be making the same mistakes over and over, especially with some particular question. And I can't seem to figure out what it is in my process that I'm not getting correctly.
Yeah, it's a good question. That can get really frustrating to not see what's making it click. And so,
Yeah,
I mean, a couple ideas for that. One of them is the explanation videos. I've got explanations for the vast majority of logic games. So take a look at those. Those may help. I would also suggest coming to the Tuesday night sessions, Tuesday night study groups, where you can get together with other students and workshop those problems. And then if there are certain recurring conceptual things, let me know and I can organize a class around it. Like the rule that you mentioned, I'm thinking I could do a class where I walk through that exact rule with a couple different examples, and maybe some other rules that are a little bit unusual where it actually takes time to slow down and dissect those, but it's valuable because those things repeat. So that's another place that we can work those things out.
Yeah, I think that will work best because I've noticed I'm a particular kind of student where I would like sit in the front row technically, but the thing is like I don't participate much. I'm more like behind the scenes and like I'll take notes. And my thing is I don't want to participate because I'm like, what if I get it wrong? Or what if I get it right, but then I can't really explain it on the spot? And then it's like I freeze up. So it's like that's what I've noticed with almost every past LSAT course I've taken. And then it will be oftentimes a lot of instructors won't pick on the students that are iffy with the LSAT material. They'll always pick on the students that seem to know the correct answer, can explain it on the spot, or can teach others. So they'll always go for the stronger, more vocal kind of students. And I'm just a student that gets it, but I'm not 100% confident and why I chose it as the correct answer.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And in my classes, I don't run it like that. I actually, of course, I'll welcome students who want to participate, but I'll also welcome and call on students who don't always raise their hand or don't always engage. I want everybody to speak at some point, and I want everybody to teach at some point. And it's okay to get things wrong, and it's okay to not be sure. And that can occasionally lead to some awkward moments for everybody involved, but it's part of the process. And you'll see that when you watch my group coaching videos. I've done like 20 so far there in the course, and you'll see that there are some awkward moments sometimes, but we move past those. I don't typically edit those out unless they're really long. But the idea is that this is a place to fail, and I'd rather that you fail here than on test day. And awkward moments are part of the process. And you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because the LSAT will make you uncomfortable at times. It will make you feel dumb at times. At least it did for me. But that's part of the learning process, though. And so it's important to get things wrong. It's important to identify weak areas, and it's important to be challenged on your understanding, as you said, to make sure that you not only got it right, but you got it right for the right reason, to ensure that you won't make that mistake again in the future.
Okay, that makes sense. I register that it processed.
Awesome. Yeah. So come to class, ask your questions. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. Nobody's evaluating you with a rubric or a spreadsheet here. This is simply for your benefit here. And the idea is that you will grow and learn from this process. You'll come out at the end a different person with a higher score.
Okay, so I have a question. I was doing week 1, like specifically the strict sequencing game, and I've noticed I'm either getting half the questions correct or maybe like 1/3 of the questions correctly. So is it possible, as I advance further with logic games, if I wanted to go back and just redo them all, can I just redo them all to see how far I've progressed?
There's a tricky thing with redoing problems. Obviously, if you remember a little bit, your score could be inflated as a result. And so I wouldn't suggest that you redo those for the purpose of measuring your progress. I would say do a fresh logical reasoning section and see how your accuracy is on that one. But there is also value in redoing problems, which is just to make sure that you really understand everything. Because if you review a section and redo it and don't get perfect on it, then there's still something to be learned from that section that you didn't fully understand. And it can be frustrating to say, I just reviewed that. How could I get things wrong again? And the answer is because the LSAT's hard and your memory is not perfect. But the ones you got wrong twice are definitely worth diving into, especially if you chose the same thing multiple times, because there's something to be learned there clearly. And make that gain in your understanding now, so that if it comes up again on an actual test day with that same method of reasoning, that same concept, you'll get it right when it counts.
So for the logic games, there was, I think, 4 games that I just left untouched because I was just looking at the scoring and I was like, okay, I'm clearly bombing this section. I'm just not getting it. So I was just like, maybe if I move forward and study the other game types and then come back and attempt these 4 strict sequencing games, I was like, hopefully there is some progress. But I just have a question in terms of review. I want to know, how can I make my review much more efficient and effective instead of just looking at the answer and looking at the response and just say, oh yeah, I got it, it registered. Like, what can I do to challenge myself to make sure like the review process and what I am learning actually sticks? I'm not making the same mistakes moving forward in future prep test exams.
You are speaking my language, and I'm so glad that you're interested in this, because not enough people are, and it's actually one of the most important things. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into all the details on that now, but I have taught multiple classes on this, including an hour-long class focused specifically on question review strategies. And so I will send you the link to that after this call, and I'll encourage you to dive in on that. Additionally, many of the masterclass videos involve critiquing student-written review, student-written explanations, for the purpose of helping them improve their review process. And so once you dive into the course, you'll see plenty on that, and that'll give you all the answers you need about how to go about this. And the answer is that review takes longer than you think. It takes longer than you want it to, but there's a tremendous amount of value to be gained there.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad we connected tonight. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I think the biggest insight that I received from the call is that the LSAT, it's a journey, and it's a journey that's it's unique to every single individual. So with my conversation with you, since you've done this so long, you didn't make me feel inferior. You didn't make me feel stupid or dumb, because I am highly educated and I've been on this process for like 3+ years and I've taken almost every course. So you gave me a lot of tips and strategies and suggestions that will help me with this process so I can do well this time around. So that was the biggest takeaway that I've received, because I know with other LSAT courses, they necessarily didn't give me the time or day to explain where I was going wrong with my process. So the simple fact that you were able to take the time and to kind of maybe give me some tips and tricks to help me critique my process and not make those flaws moving forward, that was the biggest takeaway for me. So it's like, right now you reassured me to let me know like everything is fine, you're doing nothing wrong, and wherever it is that you're kind of deviating, like I've seen it multiple times before, and it's something we can fix. Like, yeah, it will take some time and some review on your part, but it's not gonna completely throw you off your path. Like, it's gonna put you back on your path, and it's gonna help you overcome those little hiccups that you're experiencing right now. So it just really reassured me. So that's what I took away from this.
I'm really glad to hear it. Well, please keep in touch. I'll see you in class soon, and we'll continue exploring all of this.
All right. Thanks a bunch, Steve. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.